Hi and welcome back to my channel. Today I'll be showing you how I made this Eren sculpture, so let's begin. Of course, Eren being a humanoid character requires a humanoid guide and a humanoid armature. And the first thing I'm doing is giving it some volume by adding air dry clay in the torso, legs and arms. If you activate your Sharingan, you'll notice that I'm not putting any clay on the joints. That's because at this point I didn't know what pose I was going to give him. I also made this little leg for what would become the head. For now I'm going to wait for it to dry and later I'll work on its details. Now, going back to the pose, I tried different ones, but at the end I settled on the throwing a punch one, so I'll secure the pose in place by putting epoxy on the joints, and before working on the details, I'll give it more volume with air dry clay and I'm also gonna leave it drying for the day. While that dries, I'll be preparing the clay for the muscles by mixing a good amount of air dry clay with yellow, red and just a little tiny minuscule bit of black paint. Something really important that I recommend is that in case you're going to work on a character that is mostly one color, like Eren, and if you're working with this type of air dry clay, you should prepare enough clay of the color you're going to use. I say this because I didn't prepare enough for this figure and later on I ended up paying the consequences. You'll see what I mean. And now with this thing completely dried, I'm gonna start to put the muscles one by one, and even though this part was a little repetitive because it was basically the whole figure, this character is pure muscles and 90% of the time I spent on this figure was placing muscle after muscle after muscle. I must say that it didn't feel so tedious. I actually had fun making this figure. Let's say that within the things I've done, not only for the channel but also for commissions or other things I do in my free time, characters that are kind of organic looking are the ones I enjoy doing the most. Unlike robotic characters or the ones that are just armor, those are... So you know, I'm probably never going to make an Iron Man. Also, another aspect that I liked about making this figure is that I had to revisit a little bit of human anatomy. One book that was very helpful in this anatomy thing was Anatomy for Sculptors. I recommend it a lot because it dedicates whole sections to each part of the body. So we have a chapter that talks about the arms, another one that talks about the legs. In addition to these chapters, there are mini sections dedicated to each one of the muscles, to their location, their behavior and all that. So yeah, I highly recommend it. Now, it is also important to mention that for this particular figure I had to modify the human anatomy a little bit to fit the style of the character. Obviously, it is not an exact replica of a human body, it is a fictional character. I did take into account the human anatomy, but I always gave priority to properly represent the character. The most notable aspect in this case is that even though he's naked, he doesn't have a penis. And now going back to the head, first I'm going to wrap this little white egg with the same skin colored clay I used for the body. Then I'll poke a couple of eye sockets, and while that dries I'm going to make this little V-shaped piece that would become the lower jaw. I want to make him with a big and wide open mouth, just for dramatic points, and in these situations it is easier for me to make two separate pieces, one for the lower jaw and the other one for the rest of the head, which by now is already dry, so I'll work on its details starting with the teeth. With both parts completely dried, I glued them with a little bit of super glue, then I blended the seam with clay and water. I made the ears and I'll be honest, I didn't put a lot of effort into the ears. It wasn't really worth it considering that most of them would eventually be covered by hair. At this point I decided to paint the head. I usually save the painting part for the end, but it is a lot easier to paint the head when it is not attached to a big cumbersome body. Also, in order to paint the details inside the mouth, I realized it would be much easier if I separated the lower jaw from the rest of the head. So yeah, I had to break his jaw, a tragic but necessary step. But besides this little dental mishap, painting the head wasn't that much of a problem. and now with both pieces completely painted, it is time to attach them again. Now I'll stuck the head in place, and with that done, I'll work on the neck muscles. For the hands, the first thing I'm doing is sculpting a small square as a foundation for the hand. Next, I'll place this little brick there. Since the hand is going to be in a fist pose, there is no need to make the fingers one by one. From this small block, I can sculpt each finger without any problem. Then I just have to add the knuckles, the thumb, and the veins. And in this part of the video, something sad happened to me. To summarize, the camera that I was using to record this video became unavailable to me. It is not mine, it is borrowed, so I had to find another recording device. And let's say that this new camera is fucking shit. And I only realized this when it was too late. But don't worry, later in the video I was able to have the other camera back. But yeah, for now the quality is going to be fucking trash. Sorry. Now we're almost done with the sculpting part. The next step is to attach his hands to his handless body by taking a couple of wires and bending them like this. Then I'm gonna carve a couple of holes in both the hands and the arms. One end of the wire goes into the hand hole, secured with a little bit of glue, and for better connection I'll fill the remaining space in the hole with epoxy. The other end follows a similar process but in reverse. So I'll coat the wire with epoxy, apply some glue, and carefully attach the hand. As you can see, the figure has a fragmented appearance. The muscles are divided from each other, the seams on his wrists are still there. We could say that he's missing the skin, and that is exactly the next step. Once all the seams, gaps, and things like that had been erased, the figure looked like this. Very pretty and all, but as you may remember, at the time of mixing the clay with the paint for the skin color, I emphasized that I always recommend to prepare enough of these mixes, and let's say that halfway through the process I ran out of it and I had to prepare more. But the problem is that this new mix was not 100% identical to the first one. This led to subtle tonal differences in some areas. It may not be easily noticeable in the video. Well, the shitty quality may influence that, but believe me, there were small tonal differences in some parts that tickled my perfectionism, so I decided to paint his whole body to give it a nice uniform color. Now he looks okay, but a little plain, so I'll add some shadows between the muscles. To achieve this effect, it is easier to use an airbrush, but I am poor and I don't have an airbrush. So I had to use my artistic superpowers to make these shadows with just a brush. It was pretty difficult, but he ended up looking good enough, and that's what matters. Now I just have to give him his hair, and Eren is pretty much finished. Obviously with this pose the figure was not going to stand on its own, so now I'm going to work on everything related to the base. First I'm going to put a little screw on this foot. This will help me to secure the figure on the base, and for the base as such I'll mix a good amount of clay with black and brown paint. Then I'll press this on a flat surface, not too hard, just enough to flatten the bottom. As it is a pretty thick chunk of clay, it's going to take a long time to dry. In this case it is best to leave it on a foam surface like that one. With the base dry and the old camera back, it is time to glue the figure onto the base. So I'll carve a little hole here, put epoxy and super glue here, put the figure here, and that's it. Of course I'm not gonna leave the base like this, it looks fucking lame, so I'll cover the whole thing with clay mixed with brown paint, and with a piece of sandpaper I'll give it some texture. I'm also gonna add some rocks on top, then I'll give it a dark brown wash, followed by a green dry brush to bring out all those details. And that's it! Don't forget to leave a like and subscribe and all that. See you on the next video. Bye!